On the show this week, we get an early exclusive test drive of the new Suzuki Swift coming to India in early 2018. Also on the show, Kawasaki's superb Z900 street naked bike. And we ride the latest from Triumph, the new Bobber.
Well, today I'm driving a very special car because any car that's made by Maruti or Suzuki, everyone sits up and takes notice because 1 out of every 2 cars sold in India has a Maruti or a Suzuki badge on it. But the car I'm driving is not just any old Maruti. This is the 3rd generation Swift that's due to hit our shores in 2018 around the time of the Auto Expo in February. So let's take a look and see what India's most loved hatchback is really like. Now the difference between the 1st and 2nd generation Swift, that really wasn't much. But now with this 3rd generation, it really looks completely different. And I think the talking point really is the nose with the really big grille and these pointy headlights, which have what all cars now come with, which is daylight running lamps and projector lamps as well. So clearly this car really does now stand out from the crowd. It doesn't look like the Swift of the past. It still looks like a Swift, but really it's got a lot of new modern design elements. I think what really characterizes a Swift is its 2-box profile. This is a very distinctly 2-box car. Not great for packaging, but it really gives a fantastic proportion. It gives the car a lot of identity. You've got the usual Swift styling cues, which is a greenhouse that tapers towards the rear. And for the first time, what Suzuki has done is given the door handle in the C-pillar. Now I think that's a little passé, but it does look different. Let's actually start by checking out the rear. Well, there's definitely a lot more legroom in here at the back, and the wheelbase of the Swift is bigger than before, and that's translated into better passenger space over here. But the big surprise is the boot. It's 25% bigger than before. The fat C-pillar though blocks out light and doesn't make the cabin feel as big as it is. Well, the driver's seat is the place to be in the new Swift because the front seats are very comfortable, just like they've been in the past 2 generations of this car. There's a lot of under-thigh support, good side bolstering this time as well, and there's a feeling of snugness in here. You really feel like you're in control. But like before, lots of dark plastics. This is not a very airy cabin, as we've said before, but a lot of interesting touches. I like these rotary dials over here. They have a nice feel to it. USB port. And unlike the Baleno, where it's really far in, this one is a lot more accessible. But again, it's not backlit like they have in the Hyundai. And again, if there's one thing to fault over here, there is a lot of cost cutting. They've carried over the switchgear now for the 3rd generation. Yes, all 3 Swifts have carried the same set of window winder cluster. Now this is how Suzuki really saves money. This is how they really save costs. That's really the DNA of Suzuki. But I have to say overall, I think it's a great cabin. What's a nice touch are these analog looking dials. They're really well made. They're nicely detailed. They've got a bit of a retro look to them. Chunky steering wheel feels good to hold. Yep. I'm good to go now. The Swift is based on the Baleno's lightweight hardtech platform, and what that means is that the new Swift, despite being bigger, is much lighter than before. What's carried over from the old Swift is the K-Series 1.2 petrol motor, which we know so well. It's smooth, loves to be revved, but like before, lacks that mid-range punch, and you have to use the gears to get the most out of it. Now the Swift I'm driving is a European version. It's calibrated for European roads, so there's a slight stiffness in the suspension, and you can feel it on the odd uneven patch I'm driving on. But what for sure is that for India, the suspension will be completely recalibrated. What's disappointing is the steering. It lacks the feel of the older car and isn't as eager to dart into corners. Sadly, this is not the driver's car the older Swift was. So here it is, the new Swift. It's bigger, it drives better, and it's got a lot more space, a lot more luggage space as well. The new Swift feels a lot more grown up, and the styling too is bolder and more distinctive. No doubt this will be another winner from Maruti. It's just that the character of the previous car is missing.
Mean, green and ready for lean, the newest street naked from Kawasaki is ready to take on the urban scramble. But is it capable of even more than that?
Now we all know that the Z900 from Kawasaki was an absolute bomb to ride. It had a brilliant engine, extremely predictable handling, and was made by Kawasaki from 2013 to 2016. For 2017, Kawasaki has replaced the Z800 with the Z900, and we've taken it to the streets to see how much has actually changed.
Carrying forth the Suzuki styling of its predecessor, this new Z900 displays a new headlight cluster in the Z series. The front bikini fairing is all new, so is the tail section, and it even exhibits a new exhaust design. This new twin headlight has a more fluid look to it, with a forward jutting jawline that accentuates its aggressive look. The negative lit LCD speedometer is all new and shared with the likes of the Z650 and the Ninja 650. It's got a nice semicircular cascading tachometer, a gear indicator and a large centralized digital speed readout. The tank has got a nice organic shape to it that goes well with the typically Suzuki design theme. There's a nice wide seat that follows that's well padded and reasonably comfortable on longer hauls. The tail end culminates in a typically Z series fashion and has the LEDs placed in the shape of a Z. The slightly boxy and angular nature of the Z800's design has given way to more organic curves. It is still unmistakably a Z, and its overall silhouette has been pretty much carried over from its predecessor. One point that must be mentioned is the exquisite levels of overall fit and finish.
Now the seating position on the Z900 doesn't feel overly aggressive. In fact, it's quite neutral. And thanks to the compactness of the motorcycle, it doesn't feel intimidating at all. In fact, this would make a great city bike, and wouldn't say no to a little bit of touring as well. Of course, you might need to get a slightly higher windscreen for that.
The Z900 gets a frame that's all new as well. Kawasaki has dropped the older cast alloy backbone chassis from the Z800 in favor of a tubular steel trellis unit that weighs only 13.5 kilos, which is about 1.5 kilo lighter than the similarly new trellis on the smaller Z650. With 5 rigid mounts to the motor, it makes the engine a stressed member of the overall chassis now.
Now this 948cc inline 4-cylinder motor is derived from the Z1000 and makes 125 horsepower in this state of tune, which is still 12 horsepower and 17 Newton meters of torque more than the Z800. Now if you combine that with the 20 kilos of less weight on the Z900, what you get is a bike that is really fun to ride.
As expected from an inline 4-cylinder engine from Kawasaki, refinement levels of this engine are simply exquisite. From the moment you thumb the starter button, there's a nice bassy buzz that transforms into a positively manic howl as the revs climb. As expected from a naked, the engine offers a nice meaty mid-range with a noticeable kick after 6,000 RPM. The engine has been equipped with a secondary balancer driven on the 6th web of the crankshaft to reduce some of the excess vibrations, and there's minimal vibration in any situation. Kawasaki has also developed an assist and slipper clutch which makes action at the lever light and assists with excessive engine braking. In keeping with its Street Fighter character, the Z900 gets a short ratio gearbox with pretty closely stacked gears until the 5th gear, and the 6th gear is a relatively tall one. In fact, combined with the high refinement levels, you can pull away from speed breakers from 20 km per hour in 3rd gear with no resistance whatsoever. Suspension, on the other hand, hasn't seen a massive revision over the outgoing model. It retains the beefy 41mm adjustable upside-down forks at the front. The back still has the familiar horizontally mounted linked monoshock. Overall ride quality is quite good over our less than perfect Indian road conditions. Bumps and low and high speed are handled in a predictable manner. While most mechanicals have either improved or stayed the same, brakes tell a slightly different story. The dual petal rotors at the front seem to have reduced in size from 310mm to 300mm, but retain the opposed 4-piston calipers, and the stopping power of the Z900 is far from insufficient. While the initial bite is light and predictable, squeeze on a bit harder and the brakes will scrub off speed at a phenomenal rate. One noteworthy point that must be mentioned is the cooling system. It's absolutely outstanding. Even while ambling through heavy city traffic, there are almost negligible levels of heat from the engine, which is commendable for a larger displacement motorcycle.
Now the Z900 is a great replacement for the Z800. It's simple, light and effective. All the ingredients you need for a motorcycle that's really fun to ride. But because of the lack of traction control, we feel this would be a better suited bike for intermediate to well-seasoned riders. Now the bump in pricing is really worth it. You get a whole lot of bike. That's a lot of fun and still quite easy to ride.
If you think I'm riding some one-off motorcycle built in a shed, you would be wrong. Because while this bike shouts custom, it has in fact been built on a production line.
This is the latest from Triumph's retro-modern Bonneville range, the Bobber. And already after just a little bit of riding and a lot of staring, I think it might be my favorite Bonneville.
For those of you who are not very familiar with what a bobber is, here's a quick lesson. Bobbers are a type of motorcycle characterized by chopped rear fenders, absent front fenders, minimal bodywork and a hardtail frame. They were initially meant to go fast, but soon evolved into a style statement.
Now regulation compelled that this bike have a front fender and a proper rear fender, and concern for backbones necessitated a rear suspension, but that aside, the compromises have been few and far between.
Triumph has gone to great lengths to ensure that this bike looks as classic as possible. You have the bobber type single seat, chunky fat tire, relatively large and skinnier front tire, not to mention the wire spoke wheels, the wide handlebar and the bar end mirrors. But what really impresses are the clever touches that mask modern day necessities. First up, you have that cage type swing arm round the back, which allows the bike to look like a hardtail but actually feature a monoshock hidden under the seat. Then you have fake carburetors that house the injectors, a vintage style battery cover, stainless steel strap and all, as well as those vintage looking tailpipes. Also brilliant is the finishing. The colors, the textures, the finishes, they are all just fantastic, ranging from the brushed steel of the exhaust pipes to the bronze badging on the seat, engine and speedo.
But if you think that this is just a show bike, you sir are wrong. Because the Bobber, as we will soon discover, can really walk the talk.
The Bobber is powered by the same 1200cc liquid-cooled parallel twin as the T120. Though the power delivery has been tweaked to provide more bottom and mid-range grunt. And boy does that make a difference. Pushing the power lower really makes this engine feel a lot more like a cruiser's, a feeling further enhanced by the relatively tall gearing. The Bobber gets right bar wire throttle that makes the rolling on and off that much smoother. And also great is the slip and assist clutch, which does a great job of lightening the clutch lever while reducing rear wheel clatter during hard downshifting. But where this bobber really shines is around the corners. Handling is just so neutral and the bobber feels perfectly happy to tip into corners and stay there. Those grippy Avon Cobra tires also help a lot. This one is a bike that handles way better than you expect it to. Everything about the bobber must sound really hunky-dory, but there are a few small problems. First up, the brakes. It gets a single front disc as opposed to the T120's twins, and the brake bite is a bit lacking. The stopping power is there, but you really need a full forefinger pull to actually summon it. And then the ride. Bobbers were originally hardtails, and there were times when I thought this one was too, despite that monoshock. The ride is stiff, spine-jarring stiff, which is especially problematic given the conditions of our roads.
The bobber is definitely a fantastic bike to ride on straights and around corners, but its seating geometry restricts its use as a long-distance tourer. The foot pegs are very comfortably placed, but the seat, even at its closest setting, is a bit far from the handlebars, forcing you to, be in this hunched-over position. It does look cool, but it is definitely not comfortable for long-distance runs.
On the equipment and features front, the bobber is loaded to the brim. You get 2 riding modes, ride-by-wire, switchable traction control, ABS, an adjustable seating position, adjustable instrument cluster, hazard lights, and a slip and assist clutch.
As I said before, the bobber is my new favorite of the Bonneville range. It may not be the most practical bike for Indian road conditions, but its style quotient is just way up there. And at Rs 9 lakh ex showroom, it's practically a steal.
Global multinational energy company, Shell is on a mission to minimize the use of ever-shrinking resources at our disposal. The company has invested heavily in green programs, from finding ways to convert household trash and agricultural waste into usable sources of energy, to testing diesel extracted from waste. While this man-made diesel may be years away from being commercially available, but what seems a lot more closer to being a possibility is the Shell concept car. Conceptualized and designed by Gordon Murray, better known for his contribution to Formula One and being a key player in designing the McLaren's iconic F1 supercar, this minuscule car he built is to maximize efficiency and minimize emissions. This car is powered by a small 660cc 3-cylinder petrol engine sourced from a Mitsubishi. A team of 8 engineers from Gordon Murray's team spent 800 hours to optimize this engine to achieve the aforementioned goals. Being the technology partner, Shell came up with a bespoke motor oil with a grade of 0W12, which is the thinnest lubricant ever made by the company. This alone has helped the car achieve an extra 5% more economy. We did have a go in the science project on wheels, but unfortunately the drive ended as soon as it began. Sorry, no exhauster report here. But what we can tell you is getting into and out of the car is quite dramatic as the front of the car opens like a clamshell. The driver's seat is placed in the middle, like in the McLaren F1. While that feels a bit odd at first, what feels odder is the fact that there's no AC. Kevin Doyle, the chief engineer who worked on this car extensively, said it's quite cold in the UK and mostly raining, so they didn't fit an air conditioner. What he also added makes a lot of sense, as achieving 38 kpl would have been difficult with one. To talk more about this concept car, we have Kevin from Gordon Murray Designs joining us. He can tell us a lot of details about this car. Kevin, can you tell us what materials you guys have used to make this car?
Okay, so this car is mainly carbon fibre. We've used a process called iStream. iStream, which is an IP for Gordon Murray Design, and it's basically a tubular structure, 60mm diameter tube, only about 1.5 mil thick, and then you bond on the carbon fibre onto that, and that gives you the strength.
Start the engine and it sounds more like a 2-cylinder motor at idle, with fair share of vibrations. As we started moving, the car felt jerky at slow speeds. Kevin quickly replied, "That's the automated manual transmission sourced from the smart car, which has developed a small problem." Nevertheless, we didn't get a chance to extensively test this car,
But Kevin Doyle has tested this car extensively at the Millbrook Proving Grounds, and you'd be surprised to learn that apart from returning a very green 38 kpl, this car can do 156 kph and breach the 100 kph mark in 15.8 seconds. However, I'm convinced that it is the high efficiency that will stick to most minds like hot oil.
Has this car been crash tested?
Yes, all of our cars, we do not. We could make it a quadricycle, but for this particular car, T25, it has been front crash tested, rear crash tested, and side impacted. But this for the Shell car, it's part of that family.
Well, though still very much a concept, Gordon Murray and Shell's idea of a green car seems tailor-made for India. Maximum efficiency, minimum emission is after all the need of the hour.